afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman lashes at lawmakers for failing to elect a new president, saying their act during Wednesday's parliamentary session was undemocratic. U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon David Hale says external powers, including Washington, are not playing a role in the Lebanese presidential election as it is a Lebanese matter. And at least 18 people, including 11 children, are killed in suicide bombings in the central Syrian province of Hama. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman says obstructing the quorum of the parliamentary session held to elect a new president was an undemocratic act. His comments came during a speech held before diplomats at the presidential palace in Babda. He was referring to Wednesday's parliament session when lawmakers failed a second time to elect a new president as the loyalty to the resistance and the change and reform blocs obstructed the quorum. The president also called on Lebanese parties to work on avoiding vacuum in the president's seat and elect a patriotic head of state without foreign intervention. Sleiman also called for limiting the use of weapons to the army, saying it will lead to improving the state's capabilities to counter spying, terrorism and money laundering. U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon David Hale says the presidential election is a Lebanese matter and that Washington's role lies in helping to protect the polls. Following talks with Speaker Nabih Berri and Ain Tine, Hale also lauded Berri and other political leaders for the seriousness with which they are addressing the elections.
Well, good morning. I just had a very good meeting with President Berri. We discussed a range of issues, including, of course, the presidential election. I want to commend him and other Lebanese political leaders for the seriousness with which they are addressing the issue of the election. Lebanese presidential elections and its parliamentary elections this fall are entirely Lebanese processes. The Lebanese must choose their leaders, and those leaders will have serious work ahead of them. Lebanon is facing a variety of economic, security, and social issues, and if they're not properly addressed, all three arms of the government, if they are to be properly addressed, all three arms of the government should be functioning. The international community and certainly the U.S. need representative Lebanese partners if we are to help this country. Many ask about the role of the international community, including the United States, in this election. It's very simple. Our role is to assist the Lebanese to protect this process so that a Lebanese president is elected by the Lebanese according to their constitution and on time. We have no role in picking or choosing a candidate, nor should any other foreign power. It is only the right and the responsibility of the Lebanese. Thank you very much.
Officials from the northern city of Tripoli have sought emergency assistance for people affected by recent armed clashes following a meeting at the home of former Prime Minister Saad Hariri's North Lebanon advisor, Abdul Ghani Kabbara. The officials said implementing the security plan must coincide with the immediate implementation of a relief assistance program for those affected, particularly those who need emergency medical and social care. The Tripoli meeting, attended by future MPs Ahmed Fatfat, Samir Jisr, Mohamed Kabbara, Khalid Dahir and Moain Mirabi, as well as Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi, also urged the government to finalize development projects for North Lebanon and speed up the appointments of governors for Akkad and Hermel. Nevertheless, the officials hailed the security plan for Tripoli as successful and praised former Prime Minister Saad Hariri for pledging to support a road rehabilitation plan. Hariri has vowed to repair the damaged Zira Street, which separates the warring Tripoli neighborhoods of Jabal Mohsen and Bab al-Tibbani. The Lebanese army has carried out several raids in Baalbek, East Lebanon, in search of suspects. Backed by armored vehicles, soldiers raided Brital and the Sharawani neighborhood to apprehend wanted individuals as part of the military security plan in the Bekaa Valley to restore law and order. In Brital, the army cordoned off the villages and closed off its entrances as soldiers launched their manhunt. At least 18 people, including 11 children, have been killed when suicide bombers blew up two vehicles in the central Syrian province of Hama. State media reported the bombers hit the towns of Jibrin and Al-Humayri, blaming terrorists for the attacks. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says at least 15 people had been killed, and the two towns targeted are majority Alawite. Today's attack came after a double-car bombing claimed by Al-Qaeda killed at least 100 people on Tuesday in a majority Alawite district of the central city of Homs. The bombings come in a particularly bloody week in the Syrian conflict, which also saw 33 civilians killed in the northern city of Aleppo on Thursday when government aircraft bombed a popular market in a rebel-held district. Al-Qaeda's leader Ayman al-Zawahiri has ordered the group's Syrian affiliate, the Al-Nusra Front, to end fighting with its jihadist rivals in an audio tape posted online. Al-Zawahiri, in a message to Al-Nusra chief Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, ordered that all soldiers of the front immediately cease fighting other jihadist groups. Instead, he urged him to devote himself to combat the enemies of Islam, specifically Ba'athists, Shiites and their allies. The Ba'ath is the party of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Powerful rebel groups in Syria, including Al-Nusra, have been locked in fierce fighting with the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant since January that has killed thousands of fighters. And coming up next, two suicide blasts strike Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. That and more after the break. Welcome back. A soldier has been killed following two suicide blasts in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Security officials say the soldier was manning a checkpoint in the southern Al Tur district when a bomber struck. 5 civilians, all Egyptians, were wounded in a second attack nearby on a bus. Fighters have killed scores of soldiers and police in the Sinai since the army toppled President Mohamed Morsi last July. Security forces have deployed in strength to protect the resorts along the South Sinai coast that are a major plank of the country's battered tourism sector. At least 5 Libyan soldiers have been killed in clashes with gunmen in the rest of eastern city of Benghazi. Military sources say the early morning clashes broke out when armed men stormed Benghazi police headquarters, prompting a unit of special forces to intervene to push them out. Medics say 11 others were wounded as fighting broke out in several parts of the city. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has arrived to South Sudan to push for a halt to more than 4 months of fighting in Africa's newest nation, a message he was expected to deliver in talks with President Salva Kiir. Kiir welcomed Kerry to State House in South Sudan's capital of Juba, where the talks are set to take place. Kerry's trip to South Sudan, his first as Secretary of State, came a day after he renewed U.S. threats of sanctions and held out hope for the rapid deployment of more peacekeepers. The fighting has largely run along ethnic lines between Kiir's Dinka people and Machar Nuer. Thousands of people have been killed and tens of thousands have sought refuge from the violence at UN bases around South Sudan. Kerry, speaking on Thursday in Ethiopia after talks with regional states, warned of the risks of genocide in South Sudan and said all sides agreed the killing must stop. Moving on to Europe, pro-Russian forces in Sloviansk have shot down 2 Ukrainian helicopter gunships after Kiev launched an operation against the separatist stronghold that was condemned by Russia. Ukraine's defense ministry says the unknown groups had shot down 2 Mi-24s while an Mi-8 transport helicopter was damaged. Officials say 1 pilot was killed and another captured, and that man-portable missiles were used against 1 helicopter, proof that trained, highly qualified foreign military specialists were operating in the area and not local civilians, as the Russian government says, armed only with guns taken from hunting stores. Ukrainian Interior Minister Arsen Avakov said on his Facebook page that troops had taken control of 9 checkpoints around Sloviansk despite heavy resistance. He blamed terrorists for the army's losses. Russia has warned Ukraine it must not launch attacks on Ukrainian civilians, who it says have legitimate concerns. Kiev says the separatists are being boosted by Russian soldiers. And now for news around the world in brief. A dozen people have been killed in a blast on the outskirts of Nigeria's capital, Abuja. A car bombing hit the suburb of Nyanya, close to the site of a morning rush hour bomb attack at a bus station on April 14th that killed at least 75 people. Besides the dead, sources say at least 19 people were wounded in the blast. 172 people have been injured when a subway train in the South Korean capital Seoul crashed into another one at a station. The incident is the country's second serious transport accident in less than a month, as it occurred just over 2 weeks after a ferry capsized and sank, leaving 300 dead or missing in the submerged hull of the ship, in the country's worst disaster in 20 years. A report says Malaysian authorities took 4 hours to start a search and rescue operation for a missing Boeing 777, with 17 minutes elapsing before they realized it had gone off the radar. The 5-page report published on Thursday night by the Malaysian government did not detail what Malaysian authorities did during that 4-hour period. Officials say the search operation is probably the largest one in human history, adding that the fate of the aircraft, its crew and passengers remain unknown. 58 people have been arrested in the Philippines for sexual extortion over the internet. Local police and Europol, who made the announcement, said the ring lured Facebook and other social media users into engaging in and recording bouts of cybersex with what they thought were young, attractive women before using the images to blackmail them. Sanjay Vermani of Interpol's Digital Crime Center said this type of extortion was practiced on a huge global scale. Police say the 58 Filipinos arrested will be charged with crimes including child pornography, extortion and fraud. Officials add that the confidence trick typically involved a woman making contact with people overseas via Facebook and other social media. The internet's Own Boy documentary recounts the story of a teenager, Aaron Swartz, a computer programming prodigy with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. After emerging as a pioneer of internet activism, education and politics, he was indicted on multiple federal charges in 2011 and 2012, setting off a complex chain of events that left the internet community reeling. Check it out.
You know, it's easy sometimes to feel like you're powerless, like when you come out in the streets and you march and you yell and nobody hears you. But I'm here to tell you today, you are powerful. You can stop this bill.
A co-founder of the social news and entertainment website Reddit has been found dead.
Aaron learned how to learn at a very young age.
Bob introduced him to computers, and he just took off.
He certainly was a prodigy, although he never kind of thought of himself like that.
He really had different aspirations for the purposes of political goals.
He was sort of learning to hack politics.
Stop SOPA!
This bill poses a serious threat for all who use the internet.
The freedoms our country had been built on would be suddenly deleted. I couldn't let that happen.
Aaron was trying to make the world work. He was trying to fix it.
Bringing public access to the public domain.
He doesn't hack JSTOR in the traditional sense of hacking.
He wasn't stealing, he was making a point.
They arrested him, strip searched him, and left him in solitary confinement.
He said, they want to make an example out of me.
On the internet, everybody has a license to speak. It's a question of who gets heard.
Aaron Swartz was not a criminal.
You can say, oh, this is another instance of cyber war. The cyber criminals are attacking us again. They use those as excuses to push through more and more dangerous laws.
This is a poor use of prosecutorial discretion.
Should have never gotten the attention of the criminal system.
We need to galvanize opposition today, because today is when it matters.
I'm still angry. This is what we as a people think is okay.
Aaron was willing to put himself at risk for the causes that he believed in.
He was the internet's own boy, and the old world killed him.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman lashes out lawmakers for failing to elect a new president, saying their act during Wednesday's parliamentary session was undemocratic. U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon David Hale says external powers, including Washington, are not playing a role in Lebanese presidential elections, as it is a Lebanese matter. And at least 18 people, including 11 children, were killed in suicide bombings in the central Syrian province of Hama. Those are your Friday headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice weekend.